It can be said that the entire purpose of the Hebrew Bible is to point to Yeshua, or Jesus. Hundreds of promises, prophecies, and symbols in the Old Testament foreshadow the coming Messiah. The ultimate example is Passover, or Pesach as it's called in Hebrew, a week-long celebration beginning with the Seder meals, a 2-night ceremonial family gathering. To see how Passover points to Jesus, let's go back to about 1400 BC for a brief history lesson. The Israelites have been in bondage in Egypt for 400 years. In Exodus chapter 8, Moses famously commands Pharaoh, "Let my people go." Pharaoh's heart is hardened, and he says, "No." God brings 10 plagues on the land. The first 9 are not pleasant. Still, Pharaoh says, "No." The 10th plague would be the worst of all, the death of all the firstborn in Egypt, people and animals. As the fateful day nears, God instructs Hebrew families to sacrifice a 1-year-old lamb, a lamb without blemish, and use its blood to mark the door frames of their houses. Then, at midnight, the Lord would see the blood and pass over their homes. That night, loud wailing confirms death has visited every Egyptian home, including the palace. Pharaoh summons Moses and speaks from a broken heart. Go. Israel's exodus from Egypt begins, and God tells Moses, "This is a day you are to commemorate. For the generations to come, you shall celebrate it as a festival to the Lord, a lasting ordinance." From that day forward, all Jewish families would celebrate Passover, the day of our liberation, with a Seder meal, which included, as instructed in Exodus, lamb, bitter herbs, unleavened bread, and wine. Now here's the connection many people miss. Celebrating Passover was exactly what Jesus and his disciples were doing at the Last Supper. Jesus even said, "I have eagerly desired to eat this Passover with you before I suffer." The ingredients laid out for their Seder meal point clearly to the world-changing events that would unfold over the next few days in Jerusalem. Bitter herbs such as horseradish, chicory, or wild lettuce represent the bitter days of slavery in Egypt, as well as the bitter cup of torture and death that Jesus was about to suffer, and also the bitter cup of sour wine offered to Jesus on the cross. Preparing to flee Egypt, Israelite families were instructed not to add yeast to their bread because they wouldn't have time to let it rise. Other symbols in the matzah recall the crucifixion. Tiny holes in the unleavened bread remind us of how the soldier's spear pierced Jesus' side. Stripes fashioned onto the matzah recall the brutal scourging of Jesus. Both are referenced in Isaiah 53. He was pierced for our transgressions. With his stripes, we are healed. When Jesus breaks bread and says, "This is my body, do this in remembrance of me," it's not a loaf of bread that he's breaking. It's matzah, the unleavened bread of Passover. Remember the lamb without blemish? The true Passover lamb is Yeshua, who lived a life without sin. His sacrificial death on the cross confirms what John the Baptist had said 3 years earlier when he looked and saw Jesus. "Behold, the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world." Finally, the Seder meal traditionally includes 4 cups of wine or grape juice to represent the 4 promises God made to the Israelites in Exodus chapter 6. The cup of sanctification, "I will bring you out from under the yoke of the Egyptians." The cup of deliverance, "I will free you from being slaves to them." The cup of redemption, "I will redeem you with an outstretched arm." The cup of praise, "I will take you as my own people." Now imagine, at the Last Supper, Jesus elevating that 3rd cup, the cup of redemption. That's when he delivered the unforgettable promise. "This is my blood of the new covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins." In the very next verse, Jesus makes another stunning promise. "I tell you, I will not drink from this fruit of the vine from now on until that day when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom." Which means that Jesus did not lift the 4th cup. And, even more surprising, the Last Supper ends, just like that. The Seder is incomplete. That leaves the question, when will Jesus drink from that fourth cup? Just as the Old Testament points to the life of Messiah in the New Testament, the events of the New Testament point to the return of Messiah, coming back a second time. That's when Yeshua returns in glory to fulfill that promise of the fourth cup. That is, to gather his people, free from the bondage of slavery, free from sin, forever in God's kingdom, which completes the ultimate Seder meal. And that is a promise to remember at your own celebration of Passover.